I'd like to first begin by saying thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure. And what I really admire is the opportunity that I got yesterday to meet with some young members of the Youth Forum. I think that's really where the answer lies to a lot of the issues. I learned a lot from my brief interaction last night with some of the really bright kids. They don't think of themselves as kids, but really thank you for giving that opportunity. And I think the dialogue with the intergenerational dialogue and the geographical dialogue is just so amazing. I bring to you some thoughts about education and the role of values. These are thoughts that have emerged. I've been teaching now, or I've been involved in education for the last 36 years. A lot of that with mainstream schools, residential and day schools, but a lot of my time now is spent with children outside the school system, homeless, street kids, in jails, children who are sick and in hospital and can't come to schools. So this is just a collection of thoughts of what I think education should be all about. I'm a school teacher at heart, and therefore I'm going to set myself a timer because sometimes I get carried away and I think it's quite important to keep to time. So, education for me is the meaning of the word educo comes from leading out, which brings out the best in you, and therefore we must understand the true purpose of education is to lead out and to bring out the best of you. So let's just quickly look at the evolution of education. It all started off with a rites of passage. It was a rites of passage. It's a process, actually, when children grow into being constructive, contributory adults of the society that they live in. And that is really what education is all about. It's more a process. Unfortunately, today it's become content oriented and not so much process oriented. And I think it's important that we learn how to learn and not just what to learn, which gets dictated. And therefore all of us have different ways of learning, and I think that's an aspect that must be kept in mind all the time, that it is a rites of passage, that it is a process of growing for children to become constructive, contributory citizens of their society. And a huge role is played in this by culture and family. And like in the earlier days, if you were part of your community, if your community was a fisherman's community, then you learned how to become a really good fisherman or a farmer. And as society moved on, there were more generic needs from adults, from children who were becoming adults, and that's why we got standardized schooling, because then you were given a choice of becoming who you were rather than being just constrained from the society or the culture that you came from. But that part of standardized schooling, unfortunately what it led to was, this is the title of a book that was written a couple of years ago in England, and I'm very, it really says it all in many ways. What it's led to is an over-schooled but under-educated society. And schooling has become much more important than education itself. My battle is to try and bring education back into schooling. And that is what my talk to you about is, how do we bring education back into schooling. Schooling has become an end in itself. It really has taken over our lives in a way that is completely disconnected with what's going on, and bringing education back into schooling is what I like to talk about. There's another little battle that I'm fighting at this point in time, and it's language battle, which is the word holistic education. A lot of people use it, and for some strange reason it's spelled H-O-L-I-S, which to me means a hole in the ground, and it should be spelled holistic, W-H-O, which means whole. So I would request you to join my battle, to write to Oxford University, to N. Webster, and everybody, can you please change the meaning of the spelling of the word holistic from H-O to W-H-O. Let's bring the W back into holistic education. Let's bring education back into schooling. So who am I? I mean, who am I going to grow up to be? What are my influences? There's no way that I am going to become who I am without my influences. And I need to understand my influences. What are my influences? And once I get hold of that, then it becomes easier. Genome. You got to understand what genome is all about. It is the genes inherited from my parents and my ancestors. I can't ignore those. Those are passed on. They are part and parcel of who I am, and those need to be understood and carried forward. The geopolitics, that is the politics of the society that surrounds me. And it's very important because that's what shapes me when I'm going to school, coming back to school, just going home. If I am surrounded by a violent society, violent politics, peaceful politics, it does influence me. And very often, schooling ignores these aspects. That is the realistic term. The next influences is my gender. When I've heard about equality between gender, but thank God for the difference in gender. That the roles that society assigns to me by my culture. Again, we should not ignore that, because then we are constantly in a struggle. We can kind of overcome them, but we cannot ignore them. They are my influences, whether I like them or not. And then there's geography. That is the culture evolved from where I live now, or where my ancestors lived in the past. Very often, when you go to America and you talk about, when you hear people identify themselves as Americans of Italian descent, or Americans of Irish descent, or Americans of African descent. So you can take the Italian out of Italy, but you can't take the Italian out of the American. So these are influences which are very, very crucial, and we need to keep them and understand them and bring them into education. So what I need to do in going forward is to use my influences positively, because these influences, unfortunately, can also be used negatively. And the idea here is that we need to look at them positively. These are my influences, and I need to use my influences positively. And most crucially, my dynamic potential. Each one of us sitting here has a very, very, very definite potential. And it's dynamic, it's not static. My potential at age 8 is different from my potential at age 16, at 30, and hopefully at 60, which I'm going to be next year. And I hope this dynamic potential continues. And I think the whole idea of education is to help you actualize your potential. That is it. You have to actualize your potential, and I very deliberately use the word actualize rather than maximize, which maximize seems to have a kind of negative connotation in me, that there is a limit to your potential. Well, what we want to talk about is actualizing your potential where there is no limit, and the degree can vary from time to time. And this, using my influences positively and together with my dynamic potential, leads to my growth as a person. And the growth as a person, as I started talking about, is the whole rites of passage, is all what education is all about. It's a process which we need to take on board. So the purpose of education that will make me the best me, that is the real purpose of education. If education, which in some cases now talks about being schooling, does not make you the best you, then it's not fulfilling its purpose. Education must make you the best you. And by developing my inner strength, I want to quickly talk, how do I develop my inner strength? Sanskriti, my culture. I need to understand my culture. I cannot live outside my culture. Using my family background and culture to the best possible way. Use it not as a hammock to sleep in, but as a trampoline to jump off with. And that is really up to me. How do I use my culture? Prakriti, my nature, who I am as an individual. That is what is also very crucial, that I understand and develop my inner strength through my culture and my Prakriti, which is my nature, making the best of my unique personality. Each one of us in this room is very, very unique, and that is what we bring to the table of the human global family. And karma, my actions. These are crucial. These are up to me, and I need to be able to deal with these in a very positive way. So, choosing the best actions. The process of education that will make me the best me is actualizing potential, and we do this by developing my inner strength through karma, prakriti, and karma. So, the purpose of education, quickly, is to actualize potential, to become good human beings. That's the whole point of becoming good human beings. And we live our lives by making high-quality decisions. We live our lives by making choices, constantly making choices. Every day, every second, we are making choices. And if our education enables us and empowers us to make high-quality choices, our lives will be of a higher quality. So that is very crucial. And if I am going to be alive, then I must believe very strongly that life is worth living. John Martin, who was the first headmaster, one of the headmasters of the Loon School where I taught for many years, said that if education is a preparation for life, then the first thing it must teach you is that life is worth living. Because if you're living in hopelessness, then you're not really going to take those positive steps forward. So that it becomes very important. And for me, the last but most important thing, the purpose of education, is to teach us to live in coherence with nature. Unfortunately, a lot of the schooling that exists helps us or tries to make us understand that we can conquer nature, that we can live in competition with nature. But in fact, what it needs to teach us is that we need to live in coherence with nature. And it is when we live in coherence with nature that a lot of the problems that we see around us in the world will start to disappear. It's a long way forward. So I'm just going to, these are some kids who I actually worked with, and we took them through this whole purpose. I also wanted to talk about family values for children who do not have families. And this is a huge number of numbers growing across the world who are homeless, who are outside the formal system, and our system does not actually reach out to them. And it is very crucial that we have a process which brings about values, family values, to the lives of the people who do not have families, and of course the people who do have families have a bonus, but that's a very important aspect that I want to talk about. So the purpose of education I showed to you, and if you think the 5 elements, that fire, water, earth, air and sky, if our process of education needs to make us understand the importance of these, crucially, I'm just showing you some slides of where we actually do this, so it's not just, like I said to you, I'm speaking to you from my area of experience. The next point that the education system and the process must keep in mind are the 5 senses. If our education system needs to take these to the higher level, that we understand sight, hearing, touch, smell and taste, which makes us who we are, they must be taken to the next level, and aesthetics becomes a very important aspect. That is what distinguishes us as humans from the other sentient beings that inhabit the world, and therefore our education system must take this very forward. 5 senses are going to be moving forward. The values, I've said that these are crucial and absolutely main in the whole purpose behind us: honesty, respect, courage, responsibility, compassion. I'm just rushing through this to make sure that you already know the importance of this, but this is what makes our education very crucial. 5 roles. We need to understand that each one of us have many roles that we play, and if our education does not help us understand how to prioritize very often, and to balance out our roles as these people. When you look inside yourself, there's a crowd in there in your head. And how do you identify who needs to be taken care of at that point of time is another very important aspect of education. And that's 5 areas of development. This is my last couple of slides, which I want to take you through. Unfortunately, most schools only talk about the cerebral and physical development of the children. But most crucially, our education system must help us develop our social, emotional, and spiritual selves. If our education system is devoid of these, that if it does not take into account how our social beings and our emotional beings and our spiritual beings are to be developed, the cerebral and the physical development actually grows in a vacuum and does not really help the growth. Raising the bar is a way we have of doing this. I'm going to go through that. And that, for me, is the full picture of education. It makes everything correct. The purpose of education, elements, 5 senses, 5 areas of development, 5 values, these are absolutely crucial to come in there. And in each human being, the uniqueness of each human being is made up that in one of us, there are some points which are stronger, some points which are not so strong, and this is like the DNA that we have which makes us unique. So our unique identity, we are influenced by our genome, gender, geopolitics, and geography. We are the results of our culture, our nature, our action, the way our values, senses, elements, and roles in areas of development combine together is unique. All these have made us who we are. We are in the midst of the process of using these influences positively, actualizing our own dynamic potential, understanding the true meaning of education, and now we need to empower the children to start this process, and this is our role as adults. Thank you very much.